You know what people don't realize is we talk at 120 words a minute. Now, my wife will gust up to 160 every once in a while, but
gust.
but we talk at about 120 words a minute, but we think at 1,200 words a minute.
Yeah.
So if a bully tells us something or we tell ourselves something, I've had women that said in the 8th grade, they were walking through the cafeteria and they heard somebody say, "Oh, look at her fat ass."
Yeah.
And she might have been a beanpole, but they said that.
Yes.
And she heard it, and it might have heard it one time, but she starts repeating it at a speed of 10x.
See?
120 to 1,200.
Boy.
She starts repeating it over and over and over and over.
Yes.
That gets etched in her brain.
Yes.
That takes over. And this is actually a neurological change in the amygdala. It's like being on a racetrack with no exit ramp.
Yes.
And gets stuck. That's why that internal dialogue is so important.
It is.
You have that, do you talk to yourself with encouraging inner thoughts is one of your questions that you ask yourself.
And we have to answer that, though, Doc, right? It's one thing to ask that question, critically important. If you don't do anything else, at least begin by being curious with yourself and asking. But once we gain awareness, that's the thing I love about awareness and consciousness. Once you attain any version or level of awareness or consciousness, you never get to turn it off. As much as you may want to, you never get to turn that switch off. So the question that will always remain is, now that I'm aware, what will I do with this? What is the move forward? And we can play the games and trick ourselves, but we're now aware. So we can talk about unconscious bias and implicit bias. I think the cousin of implicit bias is cognitive dissonance. We should want dissonance. We want to have the cognitive dissonance is just having that battle with yourself. New information comes. I say, oh my God, I never thought about that, didn't know that. Now the battle ensues. So now we can't blame it on unconsciousness. And that doesn't mean we're going to make the right choice and do the right thing, quote unquote, all the time.
But that dissonance is good.
Yes.
As you say, I was talking to Joe Rogan on Thursday last week down in Austin. He's a good friend of mine, and I was talking to him on his show, and I was telling him that dissonance or pain can be a really good motivator.
Yeah.
I was thinking back to when I was growing up as a kid. I used to go to my grandparents every summer, and I would stay with them in the thriving metropolis of Mundy, Texas.
Thriving metropolis.
Yeah, I think there were 1,500 people there.
Oh, boy. Sounds like my hometown.
Literally, there was one stoplight.
Oh, boy.
And it flashed. And it got so hot there in the summer, you just look out in the backyard and your dog just burst into flame. It was so hot. But we would go to the swimming pool and stuff, and once in a while we'd get stupid and walk across an asphalt highway barefooted. You know what happens? You get about halfway across and you go, oh my God.
Bad choice.
So you're in the middle of the highway and your feet are just melting. Okay, so what are you going to do? You're either going to run back to the grass on this side or you're going to sprint to the other side.
Yep.
But what you're not going to do is stand there in the middle of that highway and let your feet melt.
Right.
That pain is going to cause you to move. You're either going to go one way or you're going to go the other. Now, what I realized about that is people, therefore, when they feel that pain, they resolve quickly. I used to work with juries a lot. That's how I met Oprah, actually.
Yeah.
Working on her trial up in Amarillo. Juries make their minds up really quick. Remember growing up, you'd be wrestling around with your siblings and break a lamp. There is a dead heat race to get to mama first.
Yes, to tell your version.
Whoever has primacy has a better chance of surviving.
Yes, sir.
So you want to tell your story first. And that jury is going to make their mind up really early.
Yeah.
So once you get somebody to take a position and go to one side of the road or the other, how hard is it to get them to come off that cool grass back onto that hot highway and come all the way to the other side?
Yeah.
People make up their mind early, go back to where it's comfortable, And then it's real hard to get them to move their position,
Yes.
go back into that pain, and come to the other side. And some of these people that are in life right now are so stuck that getting them to come out of that position they're in, go through the pain of change to get to a new place is real hard.
It's troubling.
And that's what you're doing with these 40 questions. You're luring them back onto that hot highway to get to a new place. And you're doing it a step at a time instead of asking them to jump across the highway. You're saying, all right, first, who's the most important person in your life? Do you allow yourself to dream about what you want? Do you know who you are? Do you look in the mirror? Do you realize what you're saying to yourself? You're asking these people. And the reason I love your book so much is these are stepping stones that take them across that hot highway to get them where they're going. That's why I love your 40 questions so much.
You've got a billion things that you've made me think about. I'll see if I can capture a couple. One thing that I live by is an African proverb, and that's really the premise of the book. And the proverb is, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Grab an ear.
So those 40 questions or conversations to hold with self, the overarching question, how am I doing? Those bite-sized approaches to those small conversations can help move you. The other thing that I talk a lot about that I think is really important, Doc, is how do we view or engage pain? I see that pain should oftentimes be the best indicator of growth. That if I'm going to grow, think about the things that you've done in your life that were really good. That if you go to those days, weeks, months previous to that moment that was beautiful, there was probably some associated pain, discomfort. Well, what we'll tend to do is lean away from discomfort. No one wants discomfort. No one wants pain. But if we can reframe that into saying, that pain, that discomfort may be telling me that I may be on the edge of birthing something quite beautiful. Labor pains that a woman goes through. Why do you get through it? Because you know what is to come. So recognizing all of that discomfort and that chaos that we oftentimes will have to deal with, that if we understand it or see it as an opportunity for that growth, is important. I'll shut up. Nelson Mandela said a quote that I also live by, that in life we never lose. We either win or we learn. So we're going to take some lumps, but it's not just a loss for the sake of a loss, that it must be a loss, quote unquote loss, for the sake of learning from that. I had coaches, George Allen was my head coach at Long Beach State, and Willie Brown. And they always said, hey, you're going to make mistakes. We're not mad at you for making mistakes. First of all, if you're going to make them going 100%, 100 miles an hour. But if you're going to make mistakes, don't make the same mistake over and over. Learn from it and make new mistakes. Seek the new mistake, because that means I've got the lesson from that old mistake. And I think a lot of this, Doc, is just reframing how we see the world, how we see ourselves. Again, simple, not necessarily easy, not necessarily complex, but it's something that we can do.
But what you're doing is you've got people engaging themselves. That's what I'm saying about the 40 questions. You got people engaging themselves. And I play tennis every day. I started college on a football scholarship and got a head and neck injury, so that was over. So I took up tennis and finished on a tennis scholarship, which was a lot easier on my body. And so now I play tennis every day of my life. And if I don't finish playing tennis and have to wring my socks out and I'm not just completely exhausted, at least for 30 minutes afterwards, I don't feel like I've had a workout. If you just go down there and stand around, I could stand around at the bus stop.
What's the point? Yeah.
Why get dressed, put on your tennis shoes? You're not going to go down and work out.
Yeah.
You got to push yourselves.
Every day.
I tell people, if you got a job without pressure, you don't really have a job.
No.
You're just going down somewhere and getting paid.
Yeah.
Like I say, nobody wants pain and nobody wants conflict perhaps, but if you work through it and you enter the conversation, you enter the whole transactional process at a higher level the next day, then you're moving up. You're moving up. And
Yeah.
you got to be trying to get better every day at being a parent, at being a wife, at being a husband, at being
Everything.
a citizen, at being something. You want to be the river, not the pond. And
That's
to do
right.
that, you've got to put something into it.
I say to our players all the time, if you step on the court and go an hour and a half at practice, it's what I practice, usually an hour and a half. If you step off the court at the end of the practice and you didn't get better, you just blew an hour and a half of your day that you'll never get back.
Yeah.
So as you begin that process of walking on the court, committing to self that I'm going to find a way to get better. I'm going to get whatever it is in whatever fashion or manner that better, which is a very relative term, that you can commit to bettering yourself for that next stretch of time. And pursuing that with a vigor and a zest that pushes you. Again, the individual gets better, but that means they show up in the world as a better version of themselves. And now that social network is better because of the work that they've done.